So, welcome to the Championship Talk podcast. I'm your host, Paul O'Toole, and joined somewhere, I think he's that way, is my co-host, Thomas Falco.
Hello!
So, we're going to start with, I think we've got to start with Bournemouth parting company with their manager. We like to start the show with a managerial sacking. It seems to have happened in the last 3 or 4 episodes, and Bournemouth have duly delivered.
Can I just say, I am pulling the face. You can't see me, obviously, at the moment, but we don't like to open the podcast talking about people losing their jobs, do we, Paul?
It's become repetitive.
It just becomes like a tradition for us over the last 3 or 4 weeks. I think that's what you meant to say.
Yeah, it's one of those traditions that has come around a bit like a lockdown every couple of weeks. I'm not surprised because Bournemouth clearly have intentions of. They want to be in the Premier League. Simple as that. They see themselves as a Premier League club. However, you've got some stats around the financials. Before we go on to transfers, and we are going to do just a brief transfer summary. You've got some figures that perhaps mean that he wasn't doing the worst job in the world.
Well, we'll actually
look
put
at
some
just
meat on
money.
We'll put some meat on the bone of the story because we've got over a minute in and we've not even mentioned his name or anything like that. Yes, Jason Tindall. He's only been there since August. Well, he's been manager since August, isn't he? The 43-year-old was only appointed in August to succeed Eddie Howe. He was on a reported 3-year deal, so he was given that long term.
You normally get about a third of your contract normally.
Well, he has been associated with the Cherries for 22 years, Paul. That's a long time, isn't it, for anyone to be at one club? Not in one go, by the way. 2 spells as a player between 98 and 2006 and 2008 to 2010. I believe it was Weymouth in between then. He played 199 games and scored 6 goals for the club. Insert your joke about Dominic Solanke somewhere in there, you normally do. He's had 2 spells as an assistant manager under 2 different managers. Well, actually 3 spells, but don't want to be pedantic. He was with Jimmy Quinn in 2008 and then Eddie Howe 2009 to 2011 and 2012 to 2020. Obviously Eddie Howe and Jason Tindall went to Burnley in the interim, didn't he, then come back to the club. His record as manager was played 31, won 13, drew 10, lost 8 with a win percentage of 41.94%. So in general, that's not bad, is it? But then when you look at the players he maybe has and the Premier League money and the money we're going to talk about in a minute, probably they may have been expecting more. As you were talking about, so we'll just go on to the financials before we go on to the current situation we find ourselves in. They bought 3 players in under his reign. 2 for undisclosed fees. That was Clark and Pearson, and Jack Wilshere come in on a free. 3 season-long loans: Riquelme, Carter Vickers and Long. 13 player departures. Now, there are a hell of a lot more when you look at the stats and the figures and things like that, but I'm just looking at the spell that he was in charge because a lot of them players were released before he was appointed. £78.5 million made from Ake, Ramsdale and Wilson sales, and 7 for undisclosed amounts. So you think that's at least £78.5 million recouped, and when you look at the players they have signed, you're looking at him having a net spend of somewhere minus at least £70 million, isn't you? I mean, we don't want to speculate how much the players they've bought cost, but it's a big difference, isn't it, from players bought to players sold. The more concerning thing, and we've talked about recent form, and I think we both fell for the same thing, saying they were nailed on to win their last game, and obviously they weren't. Since the 19th of December, they've played 8, won 1, drew 2 and lost 5, including 4 straight league defeats. Although they have beaten Oldham and Crawley in the 3rd and 4th round of the FA Cup respectively. The board's official stance on this was, we feel a change is needed now to give the club the best possible chance of achieving the goals clearly set out in the summer. Recent performances and results have fallen well below the board's expectations. Now, in recent weeks, there's been a bit of a chop and change of coaching staff, isn't there? Graham Jones joined this season, didn't he? We know him from being the manager of Luton last season before he was sacked and replaced with namesake Nathan. He left to go and support Steve Bruce at Newcastle, which was seen as a bit of a shock move herself, because when you look at the odds for the next Newcastle manager, he's currently favourite, which we don't want to talk about because A, it's not Premier League, and B, Steve Bruce is still in a job, so we don't want to talk about that.
I'm not doing a bad job either.
Well, all things considered, hopefully for Newcastle fans, we'll talk about them next season, but we'll see.
You're better than watching Spurs anyway. We'll go there. Anyway, move back to Championship.
Well, you would say that as an Arsenal fan, but there we go. Jonathan Woodgate was drafted in till the end of the season. It seemed like a day or two before the decision was taken to sack Jason Tyndall, obviously, or Jason Tyndale. We're not going to say what the result of the midweek game was because we'll get to that in the main part of the podcast. But obviously, the board feel enough is enough. You say about the financials, and we did talk about it off air. He did have a hard job, but obviously Bournemouth, with the players they have at their disposal, and they still do have a good core of players, don't they? They do have a really definitely one of the top 6 strongest squads in the Championship, and they're not a million miles away. I think they're 8 or 9 points off. I haven't got the table in front of me, but they're not a million miles away from automatic promotion still as well. So
9 points.
I think they have made a measured decision, and you'd like to think they've got someone weighed up to replace him. But at the same time, if he was in a job and they were sounding people out, it's not particularly the best thing to be doing. But I think every club does that now. Very interesting to see who they go for next. I'll just sort of let you say your bit, Paul, and then we'll have a look at the runners and riders for the post in what they are looking to fill as soon as possible. Jonathan Woodgate is going to be a caretaker manager for the next game at least, so that suggests from the statement that they do have someone in mind and they aim to have that tied up pretty quickly.
When you look at their run of results, it's almost a carbon copy of Reading's results when they went from absolutely stonking the first 10 games of the season and then just fell away. However, you look, they actually fell out of the top 6 after having quite a lead over second place for the first. The first 10 games they were running away with it. Drawn 1, lost 4 in a row. I think it was actually 5 in a row. Dropped out of the top 6. Reading currently sit 4th, and I just think they've pulled the trigger very early. Obviously, lost last 4, absolutely. However, there's a team that are above them, sort of 5 points above them, that have also had a run of form this season where they've lost a considerable amount of games. I don't think Bournemouth were playing particularly badly. I don't think Bournemouth were. I don't think Bournemouth have also got a squad that gives them any kind of right to be in that top 6. I think the 2 teams behind them, Middlesbrough and Blackburn, potentially on their day are a better team than Bournemouth. I think Bournemouth are a team of individuals with no identity or way of playing. Now, you could say that was labelled at the manager. I just look around and think, who are you going to get that's guaranteed to or no one is even guaranteed that to get you into the Premier League. I mean, Neil Warnock's already in a job, but who are you going to get? I know when you're going to get to the betting as to who potentially is going to take over. One name that's recently become available definitely comes to mind, having managed in this league before, but I'd still say he would be a risk. So go on, read the names. I'll let people guess who that is.
Well, I am hoping, because I'm having an issue finding the market at the minute, I'm actually hoping that you're going to tell me who this name is. So it
Frank Lampard.
30 more seconds. Okay, yeah, and links with the club as well when you look at Harry Redknapp as well.
Absolutely, lives in that area, lives in that neck of the woods, recently become employed, did a reasonably good job with Derby. However, I'd say with that Bournemouth team, don't expect much more than where you are already. Obviously, I mentioned Eddie Howe potentially coming back. I think he sees himself as a Premier League manager. He was touted as a potential England manager at one point when Bournemouth were in the dizzying heights. I think when you look at Bournemouth's net spend, they gave Eddie Howe 90 million to stay in the Premier League. That ultimately didn't work. They've taken 90 million's worth of players away from Jason Tyndall and expect him to get him promoted.
Well, we talked.
Bournemouth are a well-run club.
Paul, I was just going to say I have finally got the page up. For some reason, I was locked out of looking at the website. I don't know why that was. We are looking at what we said it may be August. I know we both touted Bournemouth for being up there or thereabouts, and of course with their quality of squad they should be.
They still are.
But we thought at the time, although they wanted to go with the continuity because he was assistant manager before, how many times do you see the assistant manager step up at the same club where he's been like good cop, bad cop, for example? I know we've talked about that before, and actually go on and succeed. I think it's a very risky move at times for that to happen.
I can't honestly give an example where that's happened. We could say Pep Guardiola, but he wasn't an assistant. He was actually a manager of their B team. I honestly couldn't give you an answer where an assistant has stepped up and done better than the person that they've replaced.
Yeah, it's. I'm sure there are examples at Championship TA1. Please do prove us wrong.
Anything before the Premier League era doesn't exist. Doesn't matter.
I always think of Brian Kidd, for example. He was so good with Alex Ferguson, then he went to Blackburn and they went down. And
Carlos Queiroz going from Man United to Real Madrid, he did well. Anyway, go on.
I think he's lauded in Iranian football circles for what he'd done for their national team, but that's beside the point. John Terry is a heavy odds on favourite, Paul. 3-1 on, so you put £3 on, get £1 back. 7-2 Frank Lampard, 9-1 Jonathan Woodgate, 14-1 Slaven Bilic. I think he's just got a job in China, hasn't he, literally in the last couple of weeks, so that would be a very shock move. 20-1 Paul Cook and Eddie Howe and Tony Pulis, who's managed the club way back, as we talked about in our History of podcast. 22-1 Harry Redknapp, 22-1 Danny Cowley, and the rest are 25-1 bar. Looking at that market, they are reflective. I've got the odds of two bookmakers in front of me. They're pretty much reflective in both. So there was talk of John Terry being the number one candidate. He's been an assistant manager at Championship and Premier League level with Aston Villa, so be interesting to see if he can be tempted to go and do that. I think I think Frank Lampard and Steven Gerrard have set the, well, maybe not so much Steven Gerrard at Rangers, but they've not gone in straight to like the biggest job of all, have they? They've been prepared to take that step and say, right, okay, obviously I want to manage Chelsea or I want to manage Liverpool, but I'm just going to take that step back first of all, prove my worth and go for it. So that'd be very interesting to see what happens if John Terry is indeed the man to get that job. A lot of Bournemouth fans said it was right, by the way, just going back to what you were saying before about Jason Tindall being a rash decision, maybe pulling the trigger early. The style of play has not been the greatest over the last few games, and I think reading what some of the fans have put on forums and websites, and for example, they're not really surprised, and not a lot of them seem to be that shocked either by that decision. So be very interesting to see who they come up with in the next couple of days or week or so.
I mentioned at the time that they were appointing the manager on the cheap. I think that's what they did. I think they probably expected him to foul, if I'm honest. However, it does surprise me that an ex-player or a recently retired player would fit the profile of Bournemouth, given Eddie Howe and how young he was when he took over, given the fact they've given a young coach the opportunity. A newly retired and new to coaching manager would be kind of fit their profile. However, I'm surprised they don't go with one of the League One managers that's currently succeeding, Grant McCann at Hull, or even Michael Appleton, whose Lincoln team are currently leading League One. You kind of think, why wouldn't they go there? But it'd be interesting to see, because there's a couple of teams. Obviously, Sheffield Wednesday still haven't filled their manager's job, have they? So there's a couple of teams.
They haven't, no. There's
a couple of teams with managers, and they might just go with temporary managers while funds are short. And I'm going to go on to that in a second. I just want to quickly talk about Thomas didn't want to talk about it, but it's the COVID testing. 72 EFL clubs were tested between the 25th and the 31st of January. Basically, the long and the short of it, less players tested positive. I can't even read the numbers here. Third successive week went from 26 to 19 tested positive. So that just shows lockdown is working, and out of the 5,400 players and staff that were tested, only 19 tested positive, which is really, really good news. So it means that more and more likely it's looking like football will continue to the end of the season, which is even better.
Just a little peek behind the curtain. It was me who raised that point to Paul that we should talk about that before we come on air. So thanks for stitching me up, Paul. Just one other thing we wanted to talk about, actually, and I didn't speak to you off air, but when I mentioned his name in the running for the Bournemouth manager, I just wanted to raise this point and see what you think. Our friend Mr. Chancery has been at it again with comments regarding managers, because Sheffield Wednesday were linked with Paul Cook over the last week or so, and there were comments made in the press where Paul Cook said that he's been hungry to come back ever since he left Wigan, and he's looking for the right job, and he's talked to certain clubs, didn't name anyone in particular, and Mr. Chancery has said that Paul Cook is a manager he's aware of, but it's wrong of him to go in the press and say that he's had an interview when we haven't even interviewed him. So again, he's narrowing the pool, isn't he, of who he could possibly have in there, and the longer that goes on, they're either looking at someone who's maybe abroad and waiting for a season to finish, or they just haven't got that many options in front of them. It's a bit concerning at the moment. If you're,
you said that maybe the managers that we'd normally be talking about are perhaps affected by a reputation of a club. You said maybe how hard it is for Watford to find a manager. The fact they have to scour the kind of the Eastern European leagues of European football, so that could be interesting. I want to talk about the finances, so we're going to talk about sort of who we think's done well in the transfer window, and then listen to the main podcast to get a in-depth, detailed list of every single player, including the women's teams, because Thomas likes to read all them out. However, we're going to look at the transfer spend for this January transfer window, and this is the reported transfer fees. Some of these are educated guesses as well, but it's near as damn. It's probably the nearest 100,000, probably about right. Total transfers for Championship clubs this transfer window: 115 players have left the Championship, totaling £25.3 million. Players arriving in: 146 players arrived into the Championship, totaling a net spend of 5.1 million. So obviously a total profit for the Championship club of 20 million. However, a significant portion of that was the official transfer of Said Benrahma. So that was about £20 million of that. So basically we broke even in terms of transfers. When you get to the transfers, and you know, the words on loan come up a lot. We're just going to go into detail in a sec, but I want to talk about the net spend so far in transfers since the end of last season. So since the end of last season, a total of 506 departures from the Championship, totaling 338 million. Okay, 484 players arrived to the Championship, totaling 70.4 million. Total gross profit of transfers, 267.5 million. Is that quite staggering? I mean, when I read those numbers, 262 million grossed on just transfers. That's incredible.
Those are numbers that I can't even comprehend. I don't normally
$250 million.
50. I don't normally count above 50, let alone 50 million or anything like that. No, they are staggering numbers, and when you put it in perspective, although obviously COVID and the financial issues around that have played a part in maybe not, as you say, about loan deals, and even more the rise of the undisclosed transfer fee and stuff like that.
I'm so glad you said that, because I'm going to link that directly to my next point. So total spend since the end of last season to where we currently are, obviously end of the January transfer window, total spend 70 million. Last season, same period, 2 transfer windows, okay, players funds recouped 262 million, so near as damn at 30 million difference in terms of players sold, which is good. How much do you think Championship clubs spent last season in the January transfer window and the summer preceding that? This will show the impact of COVID.
You put me on the spot. You put me on the spot. I don't even know where to begin. Obviously, a lot more than has been in this sort of period we're talking about.
Absolutely. So 70 million spent in the last 2 transfer windows. The previous 2 transfer windows, 215 million.
Just a little difference.
Just a little difference. The reason I wanted to kind of look at those figures in detail is that just shows. I think you can look at it in 2 ways. It either shows a very big loss of talent out of the Championship, which I think in both seasons probably comparable, £30 million different, in the £300 million mark, which I think is probably, when you look at clubs getting relegated and clubs selling players, that's probably about right. When you look at players being brought in, and you look at the last two transfer windows preceding this season, there was a lot of money being spent on players from top leagues in other countries, and that was where that money was leaving. When you look at this season, lots of players being signed on free transfers, lots of players being signed on loans, and lots of trading between championship clubs. And I think when you look at the demographic of players, there are a lot more players. The funds that have been spent on League One players as opposed to players abroad. Very interesting when you look at that. Obviously, COVID's having a massive effect, as it should. Because
and Brexit as well, from
now on. Yep.
From when that was enacted as well, yes, because they're not bringing in younger players, although I don't really know if that happens so much in the Championship as more.
I don't think it affected this transfer window. I think this would probably be the more accurate assessment that the last two transfer windows we've had to the previous two, and I think they're the biggest comparisons. Obviously, COVID has had the biggest effect. Without a shadow of a doubt, clubs haven't got the money to spend. You go from 70 million to the previous spend 250 million. That is just, an exponential drop in spend. I wouldn't say the Championship in terms of quality has dropped by 6 times.
No. I mean, I don't want to get into a massive debate because we're trying to keep the news a bit light. But yeah, just going to say the effect of the fans is more that them not being in the stadiums has got more than a financial impact, doesn't it?
Mm-hmm. So that's the finances.
Sorry, moving swiftly.
Moving on. What club do you think this transfer window? We'll look at January as a whole. What club do you, when you look at the transfers, and you've obviously gone through them in detail, financially, the club that's benefited the most is Watford in terms of finances. They've recouped we're only talking 2 million there, so we're not even talking a huge sum of money. But which club, in terms of players they brought in, will make the biggest difference to their season moving forward? Because I've got one club in mind, and I'd be interested to see who you have. We haven't talked about this off air either.
We haven't. No. That honestly hasn't as well. And Paul's going to kill me because when he edits this sort of video together, I actually broke my mic stand just before we come on air, so I'm having to hold it. So I was hovering in like 25 different places at the minute. So I apologise.
Like a boom mic.
You're watching. It's very off-putting. It's not above my head, thankfully. It's just covering up my chins, but that's beside the point. I looked at 3 clubs in particular, and I apologise to the other 21 if I've missed out. But these are the ones that stuck out.
Should I go first then? If you've got 3,
please do. We'll just say. And then we'll discuss why.
Yeah, the club that strikes me as done the best business and I think is going to make the biggest effect, QPR.
Oh, that's first on my list. No, I totally agree because although they lost Bright Osai Samuel, which could mentally be a blessing in disguise because if he knows he was off in the summer, maybe getting rid of him now. Obviously, he's a quality player, one of the better players in the Championship, and made that side tick. But when you look at the players they've brought in, Charlie Austin, who knows the club very well from previously before, although we've lambasted him over a couple of seasons, Jordi Device as well strengthens things up at the back.
He was the player that I
thought. For me, Stefan Johansson is probably one of the key players for me in on loan from Fulham because he done such a good job with them last season in their playoff winning campaign. And they also got in Sam Field on loan as well. So although they've lost one player, they would have recouped a fair bit for him, or probably not as much as they thought they could, but they've got a fee for him rather than lose him for nothing in the summer. And they've brought in 4 players on loan who you could argue with them 4 players bring in as much quality as losing one player, and probably as a neutral I'd say yes. I'm not saying that one of them players in particular is better than Bright or Soy Samuel, but it makes them more solid, and I think that's a type of type of ethos that Mark Warburton probably would like to bring to QPR, be a bit grind results out, and their results have improved over the last, or their performances have improved anyway over the last couple of games. So
when you look, the thing that stands out for me for them is they brought in a goalkeeper, they brought in a defender, they brought in 2 central midfielders and a striker. They strengthened down the absolute spine of the team. Average age of those players 28, 29. Obviously Charlie Austin is his 30s, but average age. I thought Jordi Device is probably going to be the best signing of those. However, Charlie Austin's going to be the one that gets them on Sky TV. And we'll go into the games in a second, but he's having an impact. Go on, what was the next team?
The other two teams I've written down, I just wanted to say about Norwich, but more because they've been able to hold on to players rather than actually strengthen. Because obviously there are a lot of people hovering around the likes of Emi Buendia and Aarons, etc. There are other players there as well, Pookie as well, and Todd Cantwell as well. The fact they've been able to hold on to all of them, I think, is better than the players they've brought in, although they have brought in Dimi Giannoulis, who's gone straight into the squad. I think he's a fullback, isn't he? He's brought him on loan. Yeah. And one of the ones that's gone under the radar, I know he's only going to be there as backup and push for competition with Tim Krul, but you mentioned about McGovern maybe not looking the strongest. Yeah, Oyan Nyland as well, who was a bit shaky at times when he was in this league before, but he is a step up than what they had in backup as well, so that'll obviously make Tim
Villa, when they bought him, paid a fair bit of money for him.
They did, yes, and he's not a bad goalkeeper as well. I think he was the goalkeeper that we said he said himself he was a bit surprised with how physical the Championship was, so maybe he's learned from that, and if he can push to make Tim Krul better, Tim Krul is one of the better goalkeepers in the Championship. The other team I just wanted to mention in passing as well was Luton Town as well, for more of a romantic reason. They have brought in Cal Naismith. They brought in, I think we've talked about that before. Tom Ince come in on loan, and I was thinking about it just before we come on air. He's a player who obviously Nathan Jones will know well from the time at Stoke. So obviously he's been quite quiet, hasn't he, Tom Ince, over the last season or two. So if he feels he can get something out of him, maybe going to Luton, where there's no disrespect to Luton, please don't get me wrong, but if he's perceived as one of the better players in the squad and that revolves around him, maybe that'll bring the best out of Tom Ince, because there's undoubtedly a creative flair player in there somewhere, isn't there? So that's a good bit of business and risk-free if they've just got him on loan till the end of the season. But the one I wanted to talk about was Elijah Adebayo, who they've brought in for an undisclosed fee from Walsall as well. 10 goals and 28 League Two appearances this season for Walsall. The type of player that Luton would probably be looking at to bring in as well, bringing him in from League One and League Two. I know Elliot Lee has gone to, I believe he's gone out to Oxford on loan for the rest of the season. If I've got that wrong, I apologise, I've not got that written down. But bringing in players from lower levels who are having an impact, that's what teams like Luton Town are about. And if they can get a good couple of seasons out of him, they'll be looking to sell him on for profit as well, and rinse and repeat. So he could be one of the ones to look out for, maybe not for this season as such, but going forward into next season, because he's obviously got pedigree and that potential. It's good to see these players be able to take the step up and be able to prove themselves at this exalted level.
The one team that I think have done the worst bit of business, and it's frustrating because I think they're in a great position, Reading. Only signed 2 players, Sam Smith, 22-year-old centre forward, and Sam Walker, a 29-year-old goalkeeper. Now don't get me wrong, they've got Reading have got a good side. It just, given where they are in the table, currently sitting 4th, they potentially had. I think they would need another striker just in case of injuries. But it will be interesting to see. How those signings bed in.
Just want to end on a positive. My signing, no shadow of a doubt with this, and we talked about it last week. Signing of the transfer window for me, again at Championship Tier 1. If you disagree, I'm sure there'll be a lot of people out there. But Conor Hourihane going to Swansea, I think he's the one that stands out the most, and I think any team in the Championship would love to have a player of his quality in their squad. So Swansea have got themselves a very valuable commodity there.
He could be the difference maker ultimately if they get in the Premier League. So if you want to hear us break down all the transfers, Thomas will be doing every single one, and all the ones that are on loan and the under 10s and all that every kind of transfer that happened in the Championship, Thomas will be talking about. Trust me, I can't stop him. Also, if you want to listen to us digest the fixtures in a bit more detail when we look at the goal scorers, etc., where the table currently stands, head over to our main podcast, basically anywhere you can listen to our podcast. If you want to watch our mini-series, History Of, hit the subscribe button, because heaven knows when they drop, but they're one week dropping in the next couple of weeks or so. And this new series will be continuing every week. So leave us a thumbs up if you're happy. If there's anything you want us to talk about, or any transfers you think we missed that perhaps went under the radar, because we do try and cover them all, but you never know. Any thoughts on anything that we've discussed, leave us a comment down below, because we will bring it into the next new series. Okay, that's goodbye from me.
That's goodbye from me.
And we'll speak to you all next week. Goodbye.
Bye.